Hello, Jessica Frost Ballas here with a video for lawnfawn. Today I'm creating a Mother's Day easel card, so let's get started. First I stamped the bluebirds and tree from Heart Tree and the daffodils and tulips from Spring Basket with Copic-friendly ink. I color the images using Copic markers. I start with my darkest color, E29 on the tree, and blend out to the lightest. I add a few accents with the darkest marker and then lengthen those shadows with E27 and E25. I color the full tree with E23 and then lighten the heart with my colorless blender. At this point you can see that I didn't realize that my blender had leaked, but thankfully it didn't get on my stamped images and I was able to clean it up and continue. The colorless blender just lightened the E23 enough that it looked more like the inside wood of a tree and not the outer bark. For the leaves of the tree and the flowers, I keep things super simple and use different colors for the leaves for a little variation. I use G09, YG09, 07, and 05. I also go back in with E21 to add a little more color to the heart of the tree. Then I use Y35 and 38 for the daffodils and bluebird beaks, and RV 29, 25, and 21 for the tulips. For the bluebirds, I use B21, 23, 24, 28, and 29 with a little YR61 and 65 for one of them. Once I finish coloring, I die cut all the images with the coordinating dies. Next, I take a panel of white cardstock cut to 11 by 4 3/4, and I score it on the long side at 5.5 inches, but don't fold it yet. Then I use removable masking tape to mask it off at the score line and approximately 1.5 inches from the bottom. This is where we'll ink blend the sky for our card. I deliberately cut the panel a little wider than 4 1/4 because I like to be able to trim off the edges if the blending gets a little messy on the edge, but if you don't want to waste the cardstock, you can definitely cut it to just 4 1/4. Next, I blend my sky with Distress Oxide inks. I use Blueprint Sketch, Salty Ocean, and Tumbled Glass. I start with my darkest shade at the top of my sky and then blend out to the lightest. I go back and forth between the colors until I have a smooth transition and no brush marks. Then I carefully remove the tape and dry the ink with my heat gun. Once it's dry, I spritz the ink with water and dry it again before trimming off the sides so that it's 4 1/4 by 11. Next, I take a scrap of white cardstock that's at least 2 inches by 5 inches and blend it with twisted citron and lucky clover. I spritz it with water and splatter it with watered down lucky clover ink before drying it with my heat gun. Then I die cut it with a simple Grassy Hillside die and trim down the edges until it's 4 1/4 wide. Then I take my long blended panel and place the tree die over the sky so that about 1 inch of the bottom trunk is on the white panel and the rest of the tree is covering the sky. I use masking tape to temporarily tape the die onto the panel. Then I place the panel on my die cutting plates so that the die will only cut through the blended part of the panel. It won't cut any part of the white panel. Since the trunk part of the die and the white panel of cardstock isn't covered by my top cutting plate, it won't cut. This partial die cutting trick will allow just part of the die to cut through, helping to create the easel. Once I run it through my die cutting machine, I carefully remove the tape and die. You can see where the die has cut through the blue sky but not the white section. I use a pokey tool to poke out the inside bits of the tree. Then I place the panel back on my scoring board and reinforce the score line at 5 1/2 inches and also score it on the other side where the white panel and the blended sky meet. I'm careful to not score the tree trunk, just the sides around it. Then I fold the panel in half to create an A2 card and use a bone folder to crease it along the score line. I run my bone folder along the back of the cardstock just to make sure I don't accidentally smudge any of the Distress Oxide ink. Then I carefully fold along my other score line, popping my tree up as I fold. I also crease this score line with my bone folder. Hopefully you're starting to see how my easel is going to come together now. Next, I grab my Grassy piece and place it against the white panel to see how much of the bottom needs to be trimmed off. I use a pencil to mark that line and trim it off. Then I add adhesive and adhere the grass to the white panel. Next, I take my Copic colored tree and adhere it over the tree die cut shape. I could have stamped, colored, and masked the tree directly onto the front of the card, but I like having the 2 layers because it gives the card a little more stability. The flowers from Spring Basket are meant to go in a basket, hence the little extra bit on the bottom, so I just trim those off for my card and then add a little extra greenery on the tulips with my YG07 Copic marker to help them blend into the scene better. I adhere the flowers to the front of the card along with one of the birds. Next, I stamp the Mother's Day sentiment from Heart Tree onto raspberry cardstock and trim it into a label sentiment. I actually stack it onto a second label of raspberry cardstock to make it a little taller and then adhere it to the inside of my card towards the bottom. I also add my last tulip bunch below it. When I fold up my card front, you can rest the grass along the top of the sentiment. Then I take a strip of acetate and die cut a second flying bluebird from white cardstock. I add liquid adhesive to both die cut birds and sandwich the acetate strip between them. Originally, I was going to do this with both birds, but I ended up changing my mind. I tuck the bottom of the strip behind the grass and then slip it between the Copic colored tree and the ink-blended tree shape to secure it. When the card is flat, the bird just appears to be flat on the card, but when the card is propped up in the easel position, the bird is suddenly flying in the sky. To help the bluebirds pop a little more, I add a few clouds from the stitched rainbow die set, and then finish the card with a few accents with a white gel pen. And that's it! I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I'd love for you to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe to the Lawnfawn channel for even more crafty inspiration. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have an amazing day and happy crafting. Bye!